Hello, welcome to the podcast. This is our 16th episode or 15th, I can't remember. But today we had
17th episode.
okay, apologies. So that's really impressive. And we had today Roisin Kiberd, who has written a book called The Disconnect. Roisin is a journalist, kind of like a technology journalist, and her book is kind of how she describes it, I think, is kind of like a journey through technology, both a professional kind of sense and kind of the like actual realities of what technology is, but then also kind of a personal account of how she's dealt with technology. So for example, she'd talk about Tinder dates and ones she's gone on, or something like that. So it was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed the book. I originally heard her on Second Captains, which is a sports podcast myself and Evan actually listen to, but they have a kind of political podcast every now and then. I really enjoyed talking to her. Yeah, Evan, I don't know what your kind of relationship with technology is these days, or social media in particular.
Technology, my relationship is we're one-on-one. We're basically I'm a cyborg. In terms of social media, I've tried to like wane myself off some forms of it. Like I think if a new social network is created, like TikTok, I didn't create a TikTok. I don't have an account on TikTok, and I don't see myself making any more accounts on any other like big social networks in the future. I think
Really?
yeah. Just and even like I do like every few months I do like a cleanse of my social media where I kind of go back and delete all the horrific stuff that I have put up in the previous years.
That's one of the things she talks about in the book, is that in other, like before, you're not before social media, you weren't like reminded of the things that you did in your past through these memories, that you're like, oh my god, I didn't realize I said that, I can't remember that doing that. That's like 10 for us, that could be 10 years ago nearly.
Yeah, like sometimes you get the odd comment to like people revisiting conversations from like first year in school, and like every time I get that notification, like my heart just sinks, and I'm like, oh no. Oh no! Just quickly go on, delete every single comment that I put on. So like the conversation just makes no sense then.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, but it's interesting. I think it's definitely like the kind of going to be the question of our age, that and climate change, how we kind of interact with social media and how much it's warping our minds. I think she mentions a lot 2016 is kind of actually the big year, because that's when the Facebook and the Instagram timeline went from probably Twitter as well, went from chronological to we choose what you like, basically.
Yeah, like the algorithms decided what goes first. Yeah, which was a fairly huge change and kind of preempted like Donald Trump's election and stuff like that,
Hmm.
Brexit, and that's how those big companies like what's it called again, Cambridge Analytica were able to use that social media in such a powerful way.
Yeah, yeah. My memory of that is actually just getting more Instagram likes. I don't know if you remember that, when it changed from chronological to whatever it is now, like based on what you like, was that lots of people's likes went up. And I remember we were in sixth year in school, and that was a conversation because everyone knew when best to post. Like after a night out, we knew
Yeah,
when
I
best
think
to
I think
post.
prime time was like nine o'clock on a Sunday. I think that was the
Yeah,
perfect time.
it
Uh,
was.
yeah.
And it's so sad that we knew that, but we did.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw Instagram recently brought back the feature where you can choose if you can see your likes or not. They brought it back
They
there
brought
last.
that back.
Yeah, and they actually
Huh.
have a big. If you go onto Instagram, well, I went into Instagram there I think 2 or 3 days ago, and I had at the very top, it's like you can now choose if you can see your likes or not. It would have been nicer if they hadn't have told you that, because I assume now, but a lot of people have gone on and changed it back. I haven't. Couldn't really. I haven't posted anything on Instagram, like an actual photo since I think 2017 or 2018. So
Been a
yeah,
while.
I don't see any plans of me turning that back on. But I assume there probably will be a lot of people, mainly young people, who will
Oh yeah.
turn it on.
I also kind of part of the book is like Dublin and how it's been taken over by tech companies and how that's impacted the housing crisis. And Roshan kind of like lives in Berlin for the most part now. And there's kind of that sense of like how Dublin is kind of screwing the younger generations through the housing prices. Which is kind of like in parallel with the tech, because the tech, one point I was making to Roisin was all this technology is fine when it's over in California and it's not really actually affecting your pocket. Like it might be affecting your brain, but then when you actually, it's not the only source of the housing crisis. But the fact that there is this mass amount of internationals coming in, it definitely does affect the cost of housing.
Yeah, I would say it does, and it doesn't though, because a lot of people who are working for these companies would be probably in the higher income bracket, and they'd be looking for accommodation, like rent accommodation that would be quite higher. Like, so they're not like a lot of the people, like Grand Canal Docks. If you look at that, like I think 50% of the places there are empty, like right now, because a lot of people have gone home who are like working in the big, like Google, Facebook, all those Airbnb, like a lot of the big companies around there. So I'm not sure if like the people who are actually being priced out of it would be those same people who would be who work for these companies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. It's a weird one. Like it's a really good book, but it's just like she gets very deep into her own life, and it's incredible how personal she does get, and it's really great to read. But you can tell how much it's like such a good account of like modern life, I think,
Yeah.
and how you kind of navigate your way through different things, and that was really relatable. Different types of things she talks about. So I think a lot of people enjoy it, particularly like women, that have like similar issues. Like I think Roisin talks a lot about eating disorders, which I have no kind of personal experience with, but I did learn a lot through that as well, which was very interesting. How the kind of internet has increased that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was you was telling me about the statistic of people using filters on Instagram. Like it's crazy. Like if you go onto most girl stories who do put up stories very often, who are talking into like their phone, like all of them use filters. None, like not one would not have a filter on it. And I'm not sure how good that is for their own mental health, because when they look in the mirror, they don't see the filter that they have see when they're on Instagram, and how that would affect their thoughts and their bodies and all that. So yeah, it's not really great at all. I wouldn't be advocating for the use of filters quite a lot,
Okay. One thing Roisin does talk about is the Joseph Coney thing. I don't know if anyone remembers that. I definitely remember quite well. What I was saying to Roisin was, I remember coming home. I didn't have an iPhone at the time. I only had an iPod Touch, which was basically like as good as a phone, but you didn't have, could call or whatever. And I remember going home. I didn't like used to bring that to school, and I like opened it up, and like everyone was just sharing the Joseph Coney video. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is so weird. And then I remember seeing it. But that was like one of the funniest, like looking back, that was one of the weirdest things that's happened on the internet, I think, how big that became.
And did it just turn out to be a big scam? Is that true or not? Or is it
No,
an urban myth?
it's not that it was a scam. It was that your man who made, I can't remember his name, was arrested for being like, is it like, what's it called when you're naked in public? Is that like indecent assault or something like that?
Indecent exposure, I think.
Indecent exposure. He was like, I think in like one of the big parks in California, was just running around naked. Like I think like 10 days later, it was very soon after. And I was saying to Roisin, that was like kind of one of my first times where I like didn't trust the internet, if that makes sense. Like, because I thought this was like unbelievable when I first heard about this Joseph Kony thing. Like, we need to do everything to stop, like what's going on in Uganda. And then, like, of course, it was just one of these fads, and we all changed our profile picture to Kony 2012.
Yeah, 100%. And it was mad. But so what happened in the end? Did you ever find out? Was Joseph Connie ever arrested or anything, or killed? Or
I honestly don't know.
is he still just floating about in Uganda getting soldiers? Or
I'd say he probably is still going around. Like what Roshan was making was like, it was kind of funny how we all thought we had like this power to take on African geopolitics and make a big issue of this.
yeah, but surely we do have the power. Like that just was a failed attempt, or I don't know. Like there's been so many different campaigns though in recent years online. Um, Remember, there was another one. Remember the modular phone? Did you ever see that? And it was like
No.
this company created this modular phone. So say it was basically like a silicon board, and then you'd buy separate pieces. So you could buy like a HD display or an LED display, and then say if you wanted to upgrade that, you just take off you just take off the display. So it was always, you could always update it. So you could have like a 12 megapixel camera, and if a new camera came out, you could just buy the camera and like stick the camera on. So like it was a big, huge campaign, and they launched it really well, and it got a huge exposure all around the world. But that was like another similar enough thing where like it just went viral straight away. Like the night it was released, it went viral straight away. Like, so, but that actually failed.
Yeah.
I think Google got involved, and it was Motorola, I think, that were one of the other people involved. But yeah, it failed because there just wasn't. It didn't really make sense for the manufacturers and stuff like that. Because like they were going to like actual phone manufacturers themselves and saying, "Oh, do you want to build like a separate modular bit for your camera?" And they were just like, "No, it doesn't really make sense for us. You know, we can just make our own actual phones and stuff like that." So it was a pity though, because it was actually a really great idea. And like, imagine that if you were just like smash your screen, you could just buy a new screen instead of having to buy a new phone. Or if you wanted to upgrade a battery, get a new battery, new camera, new speakers. Or like, say if you just wanted a small screen and then wanted big speakers, if you're really into like using like music and stuff like that. So maybe it might happen.
That sounds like the best thing ever.
Yeah, it was a really, really cool idea. I think that's why it went so viral. But
Do you think that'll be like soon, where when everyone used to go on to Nike ID to make their boots, like football boots, they could like design exactly what it was? Is there any similar thing for phones?
well, there's if you go onto the Apple website, you can go onto iMac and build like the top spec iMac. It's like, I think you can spend like 50 grand if you put like the top spec of everything on. Yeah.
Really?
If you ever have a few spare minutes, I'm sure the listeners would love to do that, waste a bit of time and get the best iMac ever. And just imagine you having that big, brilliant iMac sitting on your table.
That is cool though. I never even thought about that, because obviously when they're just bringing out new phones and it's like, oh, this one's just that bit too big for my hand, but it's got such a good camera. Like, I think the iPhones now are so way too big.
Yeah, no, because I was actually, the phone that I have is a Xiaomi phone. It's a Chinese brand, and it's not as wide as an iPhone at all. So like when I'm holding, my hand is now like proper molded to my phone, if you know what I mean. And like when I pick up an iPhone, it's like I have to like extend my hand because it's actually way wider and it feels so unnatural.
Yeah. I remember when I got my new one at Christmas, I was like, this is huge. Like, this is way too big. Yeah, I don't like that. I prefer the smaller ones, and I don't know if they can make them smaller. Probably.
Well, they're using foldable displays now and all that stuff. I'm not sure if that will actually ever take off. Samsung had a really big disaster with their foldable display, and like it started breaking really quickly and stuff like that. There was creases where the folds were, so like when you folded it back out, there was still a bit of a crease and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think the projector like type files, like the hologram ones, are the next big thing. I'm not sure how soon that will happen, but the ones you just like flip up and then like the screen is there, and then you'll be able to slide them back down and put them in your pocket, so like it could fit in your wallet or something.
It's crazy. It's gonna be crazy to see what does come in the next like 10 years. But yeah, that's something that we were kind of talking about as well, like technological advances, and where that's going. But yeah, I know I've spoken to like Mark Little before, and he's obviously really positive about technology and kind of embraces every change because he knows it's kind of there. I suppose with Roisin, it's kind of more like a bit of, is this really the way we want to go with the world? So it's kind of one of those things. Like, I know she mentions in the book, it's like, say you had an alcohol addiction, you wouldn't say more alcohol is the way to go. But with technology, the solution to technology is always technology, if that makes sense. And whether is that actually the right way of thinking about it? It's like, the solution to bad speech is more speech. I think I've heard a lot of people say in the last like couple of years, and I don't know what the right answer to either of those statements are, but it's kind of it's an interesting way. What is the actual way to go about these things?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, and I'm not sure if we actually have any say in that because these technology companies are getting way too big, or we're getting so big that they're the ones making the decisions. And um, yeah, like there's going to have to be some type of uprising or revolution against them if anything does change, and I really don't hold out any faith in that happening anytime soon.
One thing we do actually talk about is imagine Zuckerberg or something ran for president. Like obviously they'd have to keep the companies that they own separate, but it would be pretty incredible.
Yeah, what of all the like technology leaders and CEOs, I found like the Google, your man, what's his name?
Larry Page.
No, he's the original founder, the guy who's like the Indian fella who's CEO now.
Are you talking about Microsoft, Satya Nadella?
No, Sundar Pichai.
Oh
He's,
yeah, yeah.
He's the Google one, but in front of Congress, you know, when they all had to speak up, and you had who was it? Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and who's that other fella, Twitter fella?
Jack Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey, like the three absolute aliens. And then as Sundar was there, and he's actually fairly normal enough compared to the three lizard people. So yeah, if he runs for president, I'd probably vote for him over the other three. Because if Jeff Bezos ever becomes president, I think we're all doomed.
Yeah, well, who knows? But yeah, here's our conversation with Roisin. Hope everyone enjoys it. Please do give us any feedback and like and subscribe. Roisin, thanks very much for coming on to the podcast. I really enjoyed listening to you recently on Second Captains. That was where I first kind of actually came across you, and just started listening to you again on a few podcasts. Just looked up your name on Spotify and was listening to you on a few things. So it's been really interesting. And how has the kind of publicity been going since the book's come out?
Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been I suppose fitting to the book in that most of it has been entirely online, and it's accomplished something I definitely wanted to achieve, which was have more conversations, about this and with very interesting people. So that side of things has been lovely. It's also received some quite kind of personal and emotional responses, I suppose, to the personal and emotional side of the book. Um, Releasing a book, especially in a pandemic, it's hard to know what's going on. Has it gone out there? How far has it gone? But I do get the sense that it's attracting maybe people like me,
Yeah.
and in itself is a message that I'm less alone than I thought I was in the world. So it's been a positive experience for the most part.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I suppose because the book is very relatable, like it speaks to the modern world quite a lot, and people under the age of probably like 35, 40 that have grown up with the internet. I think that was something I was struck with, just all the things that I could relate to and understand very easily. So I think it was really interesting to read. I really enjoyed reading it. But how would you kind of like describe it? I was trying to like give a description of the book, and I couldn't really think about it because it goes from all different types all the time. So
Yeah, it's the opposite of something you could deliver an elevator pitch about. Like it's Instagram for dogs. No, it's so the disconnect has it's called The Disconnect, and then it has the subtitle A Personal Journey Through the Internet. And that to me gets across what exactly is going on in my book. There's about maybe 50% cultural criticism and 50% memoir. Specifically about growing up with the internet. And it's a collection of essays, but the essays are interconnected. And there is a kind of a linear plot, which begins with me having a mental breakdown, essentially, in 2016, which was a rough year to be online, as I'm sure most of us remember. And ending really in 2020 with me moving to Berlin and quite a few things in my life changing. And loneliness is a thread throughout that transition and that book. It's about a journey from loneliness and isolation and complete immersion in social media and online politics to something I think a bit more balanced and where human connection is prized.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, and I suppose that's an interesting one when you talk about loneliness, in particular this year, and then obviously this has accelerated. The COVID has accelerated, digitalization, etc. But then
Yeah.
it's obviously made a lot of people a lot more lonely as well. If you were kind of unlucky enough to be on your own during this year, I couldn't imagine how hard it would be. Are you worried about this year in terms of what the kind of future repercussions with technology are going to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way there won't be repercussions. It's funny, in my working life, aside from writing and hopefully writing another book soon, I work writing about tech, about kind of consumer tech sometimes. And I also work teaching creative writing
Hmm.
lately. And in both of those sides of life, I've seen the effects over the last year. I have so much sympathy for any student
Hmm.
studying through the pandemic, because the social side of that is what gets you through, and they wrote these amazing essays for me actually over the last few months about the experience of being stuck at home during what should be this wild, fun, adventurous period of life, but it can't have been easy. And that idea of, techno solutionism, we can just put the classes online, we can put everything online and it will step in and save the day. It's never that simple. And that comes with many trade-offs, most of them to the happiness, I think, of the user. The other side is the digitization thing. A lot of these kind of businessmen who I interview about tech, it's always men somehow. There are some women, but have made the point that maybe a decade's worth of digitization has taken place in the space of 1 year, thanks to the pandemic. And I mean, look at what's just happened with the HSC. We're not really equipped maybe for that rate of change. They were barely keeping up to date in the first place. Yeah, I mean, I remember while writing the disconnect, one of my editors left me a note saying, "Are you sure you really want to bring in the Unabomber here?" He's in the first chapter, which I very deliberately wanted to include him. One, because it's a massive cultural moment, but two, because it's the chapter that he's in is kind of a rogues gallery of these mostly again men who changed the course of technological history. And I have these like figures dancing, like Steve, sorry, Mark Zuckerberg is dancing, and Julian Assange is dancing in a disco in Reykjavik. There are all these like clips throughout history. Steve Jobs is dancing on stage, and then at some point the Unabomber comes in, and there's no recorded footage of him dancing, but there is just a mention. I bring him in now because he, in the Unabomber manifesto, Ted Kaczynski writes that, we're not equipped to deal with this rate of change, that it could just take on, and I mean, much less dodgy critics have expanded upon this point too. So ones I won't get cancelled for bringing up quite as often as I do the Unabomber. But like Shoshana Zuboff writes about this a lot, and she makes the point that it comes straight from a place of greed, really. It's just all about data grabbing. And it relies on us not anticipating what's going to happen next, or not anticipating that there will be a human cost. And meanwhile, then the side on the kind of Silicon Valley side, I think the logic is just move fast and break things. Go ahead, ask for forgiveness later, or negotiate changes to law later in the case of things like Uber.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have like the version of that for the pandemic. There will be a lot of other catching up that we'll have to do.
And like to kind of bring it back to the start of the 2010s, I think you write about this, like there was a real sense of optimism, and the kind of, I've been interested through the podcast. I've like obviously been reading a lot about different things through the books that people have talked about, and I'm always interested like the issue of the day. And I think you bring up like the Arab Spring and how the Arab Spring was kind of made as this, this is what the technology can do, and it was kind of shown that like we are going to change the world now. And then obviously you were running a social media site for a cheese brand at the time. And I think you mentioned as well, like the kind of desire to make an app for everything. And, there was the same with, and probably nowadays it's probably every company feels they have to have like a podcast or something. I'm not sure what the exact equivalent is. Yeah, TikTok is probably this year actually, yeah, for sure. But like, do you remember back then, and kind of what was your thoughts? Did you have any kind of like preemptive thoughts that this could be a lot worse than everyone's making it out to be, or like is hindsight 2020?
I don't know. I think I was still very naive and excited also about technology at the time. I remember that year I went to work for an ad agency and I got this job as, yeah, the voice of a brand of cheese. So I would just go on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn for another brand, but that wasn't cheese. And I would just talk all day on social media to people about products. And it's kind of peak dystopia when I think about it now. But at the time I thought, I'm being paid to go on social media all day. Like, some jobs don't even let you access your social media when you're working, you know?
Yeah.
So it's strange. But I think one thing that couldn't have been anticipated, and I think is it's a subtle effect that's hard to pin down, is just how boring and normal it would all become so quickly. I mean, I write a lot about that in The Disconnect in relation to Facebook. But you have to keep in mind, 10 years ago, for me anyway, I had been spending time on blogs. I'd spent a lot of time on blog sites, writing blogs, reading other people's blogs, really immersed in what was a culture. You know, it had its own music, it had its own fashion, and it was a creative culture. It was one based on self-expression and self-reinvention. And even things like MySpace had that element too. You know, like when we think about the MySpace era, you have to remember these were people using fake names. You know, they were almost kind of making themselves these superstars, like in the Warhol sense, micro celebrities. And I think Facebook took the kind of function and logic of these outlets and it just simplified it and made it really, really simple and basic and accessible. And if you're doing that first time around, you wouldn't be, I wouldn't blame anyone for thinking, now everyone can express themselves. Now everyone can, you know, reinvent themselves. But it's only a few years later that, you know, Facebook is bringing in little alerts asking you to rat out friends who use fake names. And it's only, I mean, I've actually never looked at the timing on this, but I remember during the year when I worked as a social media cheese, I think that was the year of the Snowden revelations.
Okay.
And I don't remember at the time, like this reflects kind of poorly on me, but I don't really remember at the time putting it together that, you know, they were the same thing. That this platform, say Facebook or Twitter, which was being sold as a democratic thing and a life-enhancing thing that was bringing us all together, could be the same as just government surveillance.
Yeah. I was listening to Dave McWilliams today. Actually, he had a podcast on Bitcoin. I'm not sure if you got a chance to listen to it, but there was I can't remember the professor's name that he had on, but he was mentioning that at the beginning of the internet, probably or not the beginning of the internet, but kind of late 2000s, there was the moment when Bitcoin was made that the internet was either going to go down the route of like data was going to make the money, or it was going to be like micro payments that were going to kind of, people are just going to constantly have to have these micro payments to use services. And it's crazy to think how much of like when I heard that, I was like, how much of a change everything would have been if, and how different all this could have been if it was micro payments.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because in the last few days, I've been reading a lot about how the digital ad market is kind of a flimsy thing. You know, I mean, I'm more inclined, more regularly I talk about how dubious a lot of cryptocurrencies are. But then when you look at it, ad data and ad tech, it's such a bizarre market. I mean, people keep predicting that it's going to collapse.
Yeah.
Because for all of the technology involved and all the tracking involved, I don't know if anyone can really prove how effective this stuff is. You only really see it when it comes out in these kind of nefarious things like Cambridge Analytica, you know, or the Facebook emotion study or one of those. But I don't know if the ad data, how persuasive it is. You know, if we thought about the actual rate of success there, it's, who knows if it's even worth all the money being put into it and all the effort. I mean, like, you know, the whole like Facebook pivot to video thing, that was 2017, and that turned out to be a complete lie. But yeah, but Bitcoin, it's like 12 years old this year, isn't it? So it's kind of a short window of time. And I think Bitcoin would have, the other implication is the hardware. And hardware sometimes takes a long time to catch up, with
Yeah.
software. In my book, I bring in Doug Engelbart at the end, inventing video conferencing in the 60s, in the end of the 60s, basically. Like, it's wild. But there was no way that hardware was ready yet or accessible enough yet. And I'm worried about cryptocurrencies. I know about like a month ago, I was just like getting drunk with some people, small COVID restricted gathering. But this guy started explaining to me that they are developing eco-friendly cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. Ethereum or something.
I think, yeah, it might be in Ethereum that they're changing the methods, but I mean, they had better get on that soon, because Bitcoin is 12 years old and it's taking up the power of small cities in China, so that's not a viable future until it becomes more viable.
And like, obviously, to go back to Facebook there, just if you go hard on Facebook in the book, like, you really I think it's clear to say you don't particularly like Zuckerberg and the kind of whole thing he's done. But kind of my question would be, why not Apple? Like, why don't you go after them, and why not Microsoft and some of the other big ones? Like, is Google not as much of a player in this as Zuckerberg is?
Google features a lot in the book.
I know it does, but I mean, I got a sense that in particular, Zuckerberg's kind of the one that grinds your gears a bit more than the rest.
You know what? It's not actually that he grinds my gears. It's more that he fascinates me. And I don't think like Larry Page and Sergey Brin are as fascinating as Zuckerberg, because I don't think they have a place in pop culture. Elon Musk definitely has a place in pop culture, and would be someone I'd like to write about. The reason I wanted to write that chapter, and it's, bland God, notes on Mark Zuckerberg, it's right from the get-go. The reason I did that was that, to me, he is our modern equivalent to the way that monarchs were thought of during the Renaissance or the medieval era, as someone who has a physical body and a life and a self, but also has something almost ineffable that he represents, a kind of power. And, I was thinking about how, say, if you look at the royal family in England, they're not allowed to profess any political preferences beyond, I don't know, I think Prince Charles once said he's afraid of grey goo and microtechnologies, which is fascinating in itself. But like, they're not allowed to kind of come out and support one political party or anything, and they're not really allowed to do very much. Now we're seeing all that stuff with Prince Harry breaking those codes. Zuckerberg, to me, is Silicon Valley's equivalent. He's just a nothingness, and in a sense, that's the most American thing he can be. He's just this like swirling void into which data vanishes, and he just becomes more and more powerful as every year goes by. And it's not that I hate Mark Zuckerberg, it's that I cannot fathom that level of power, influence, and money, and just data concentrated in one person. I wanted to think about technology in terms of the sublime, about things which just break your brain when you try to understand them. And it's mad. I mean, he's not that much older than me, and it all happened in my lifetime, and my generation were the ones who made him who he is. He's also, the kind of inverse of Mark Zuckerberg is something I would call tech masculinity. I'm really obsessed with just the characters of Silicon Valley, in particular the men. Some of them good guys, some of them maybe bad guys, but that, the cult of personality around these people.
Yeah.
I was cooking earlier and making some chickpeas, and I just put on this video. It's 40 minutes about the life of John McAfee. I just can't get enough of like watching, because there's always this part of me that's just like, how did this happen? He could have become another Mark Zuckerberg. He created a pernicious worldwide technology that everyone was familiar with. And he used to go on TV and make predictions. But like, now he's truly insane, and he's in a prison in Spain. He's maybe going to die in prison in Spain.
I'm sorry, I don't know that story at all.
No? Oh
No.
man, there's a film, I think it's on Netflix, called Gringo.
Okay.
He have you ever seen Apocalypse Now?
I actually haven't.
Do you know about Colonel Kurtz?
I'm really shown that I don't know anything right now.
No, don't worry. You should watch Apocalypse Now, though.
Okay.
That's about this military figure who kind of goes a bit mad in Vietnam, and he goes up the river and he kind of acquires this mad cult around him, and he's like turned psycho. But
Okay.
McAfee is like that for tech. He's always likened to Colonel Kurtz. He went to Belize, started developing smart drugs in his own lab in the jungle, and then someone mysteriously died.
Right.
And he's been on the run ever since. But he's technology and masculinity at like its most extreme. Just those, it's just such, it's stranger than fiction as a world, you know? Like I was going to write a novel, but I wrote about technology, nonfiction instead, because it's every bit as strange.
Yeah. Do you know, just I was struck when you're talking there, and if you could just explain the God view feature of Facebook, but also on that, when you talk about Zuckerberg, you know that quote, and it's like, most men live lives of quiet desperation. Do you think that like Zuckerberg and Dorsey, and when they're kind of sitting at their desk, that they're kind of like seeing all these stats come up or whatever, and they see the actual numbers, that they're kind of there thinking, wow, this has gotten way too big? Or do you think that they're like reveling in this?
I think Dorsey, this is pure speculation, but I think he profoundly regrets what he's created. He seems like a smart guy, but he also seems like someone very, very obsessive. And the fact that in interviews, you know, he talks about these bizarre lifestyle habits, and he seems to just want to try something new every year. You know, he's still looking for an identity. And it's fascinating because Twitter offers people who are searching for an identity somewhere to go as well. But it's, yeah, I'd love to know to the degree, like to what degree do these men become their products almost? You know, like is Elon Musk the human embodiment of the values of Tesla, but also SpaceX? It's hard not to think he is, you know, when you see his public statements and his interviews and stuff, which to me are so, there's something so nihilistic about wanting to abandon Earth for Mars. It's, it kind of feels pathological, like it feels insane, but also there is something admirable in it. I can understand why people become his fans. But yeah, I think Dorsey probably does. I don't know about Zuckerberg. It's really, I'd imagine he tells himself that he's not responsible for a lot of it, because he put out a bizarre statement recently saying that the struggle of our times, the defining like struggle, will be to concentrate the highest processing power to like of a computer inside a pair of glasses. Like he believes that Google Glass is the defining technology of our times, which I just have so many problems with on so many levels. Like it's full circle surveillance, isn't it? It's full circle internalized surveillance, and it's going to change. It will change the world if that happens, but I'm not sure it will, because we tried and we rejected it. Like the Google Glass would have become probably mass market by now, wouldn't it? If it had caught on, but it didn't, because everyone knew how strange and awkward and invasive that would be.
I don't know though. Do you think, like, do you know when you listen to Elon Musk and he's talking about, you know, having like the processing power of a computer in your brain, like similar to what you're talking about there with Zuckerberg, and like, do you think it'll become kind of like an arms race between people where it's like, okay, this person has it, you know, okay, he's getting way ahead of me, or she's getting way ahead of me now in my job because she's got this computer in her brain, and then I have to do that, and it's like we have to keep up with it with each other.
Yeah,
Bit of a bleak view, but
no, I think we've seen that for a really long time. Although right now Google and Facebook are being watched because, you know, they're on trial for being monopolies essentially in America, and I think that's allowing new technologies to spring up while they're on their best behavior and not acquiring loads of things. So I like the idea that there's room for alternatives, and that they might speak to a human need of some sort, you know, because otherwise we're just going to be told what our human needs are by these companies. I just can't factor the need for Google Glass into anything. Like even on an environmental level, like to record all that data every day. It's funny how like what message that sends out. It's like flattering the customer into thinking their life is that important.
Hmm.
It's just sort of mind blowing to me. I can't see it catching on personally.
I hope not, but like then it's just things just seem to catch on all the time these days that you never really would have thought of. So it's kind of like hard to know. But the kind of cult of personality thing is interesting with all those guys though, and I think you mentioned Zuckerberg might be thinking of running for president, which in itself is a terrifying thought. But like, and I think that probably will happen. One of them will become, either a governor in America or become president.
Yeah, after Trump, anything is possible. Maybe RuPaul will run. That's it's not, I couldn't say it's my hope, but it's something I would love to see because it would be hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know. It's everything. It's like, dude, as you said, Trump kind of. I think interesting actually. Just something you mentioned in your book about 2016 is the change of the timeline from chronological to whatever they wanted.
Oh,
it to
algorithmic timelines.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
2016 seems like this kind of year now that we're going to look back on and be like, whoa, that was the big one.
Yeah, I thought I probably will mess up the line, but it's, in Vonnegut, there's that line about like Billy Pilgrim has fallen out of time. Like that's how I felt about myself in 2016. And I think there's just something, that perfect parallel is that was the year all these companies brought in algorithmic timelines. And what that meant was, they had decided that you didn't want to see things as they happened, that what mattered more was showing you things that you were, according to algorithms, more likely to interact with. And I just think even the fact that they sent out these little messages, like Instagram quite literally sent an email to all of their users saying, we've decided that we know what you want to see better than you do. So we're going to change it to suit you. That's a big statement. But we weren't paying attention. And next thing, fake news, of course, is this massive issue. I think in part because in order to verify a news story, you must know when it happened and how old it is. The other reason that I didn't like a question back there when you were saying why write about Zuckerberg and not Google or Microsoft. I wanted to write about the psychological side of this. All I can really tell is a human story. I don't have qualifications in tech, and there are plenty of really good, interesting books that explain the actual technical side of how these things work. What I wanted to do was take stock of the impact of this on human behavior, on how we think of ourselves, our lives, how we relate to each other. And I think that small but extremely important step of just changing time, making time part of the filter bubble, that plays a really big role in kind of the discord of the modern day internet and all of these strange factions. I mean, you could make a case that something like QAnon, it would be harder for it to come into being were it not for news feeds that don't show news.
Yeah.
Were they stuck to the present, it would be easier to disprove a story and for it to just go away. But instead, for the last few years, they've been defined by stories just coming back, the logic of the conspiracy theory again and again and again. And it's so compelling and it's so exciting and it gives people a sense of meaning. So, of course, it keeps coming back.
And was like, I don't really remember, but was fake news not really a thing at all up until that point, do you think? Or like, how was it manifesting
definitely
itself?
Around. It was definitely around, but it was easier to disprove and it was less viral, I think. Because, I mean, when a story has a timestamp and it's, it kind of comes and goes, it's just different. It just follows a news cycle, But the news cycle has changed now. Even I see it as a journalist because, like, I wrote for years for all these places like Vice, and now when you go on those pages, they put up a note that says, FYI, this article is 5 years old.
Yeah.
you get these waves of interest if like the subject of it becomes newsworthy again, and just letting people know that it's an old story is really important. It's a small but necessary part of our construction of reality, basically. um I
Do
just
you,
like, yeah, sorry.
sorry, but do you, like, as a journalist now for yourself, I know you kind of have gone on and off social media recently. Do you think it's possible for someone like kind of a young person trying to break into an industry that's in kind of in any industry these days without having some sort of form of social media and embracing that and like kind of thinking about how much traction your stuff is getting?
It's definitely more difficult because at some point you're going to run into someone on staff who will tell you, that you need to SEO optimize or
Yeah.
optimize for social. Like, I would imagine it's extremely difficult. And if you do manage to do it, you're probably in a very privileged position, really. I don't want to kind of make absolute statements because you don't actually 100% need social media. But I did make a point of, I didn't want to be one of those people who just tells everyone to delete their accounts, because it's not realistic. And the people saying that tend to be older and tend to have established their names before they ever really needed social media. But I would imagine for people working in news broadcasting, an awareness but not an immersion in social media would be enough. I think for anyone looking to make their name as an opinion writer or a feature writer or something like that, you will need to be online. And for authors, that's the big debate. I think it definitely sells some books, but I don't think it's an obligation. Look at Tessa Moshfegh. She's not on Twitter. Like, lots of really good authors aren't on Twitter and aren't on any of them. And I'm sure their lives are richer for it. I think the worst thing you can do if you're going to write books is, essentially become a slave to social media inside your own head. It's not a good way to go.
And I think one of the interesting parts about the books as well is kind of like how you look at the tech companies and their influence, not just online, but kind of outside of online. So obviously kind of the housing crisis in Ireland and how, it's one thing to be kind of criticizing these companies and them just being in California and like day to day, them not really impacting your life. But when they've set up all these massive places in Dublin and then the rent's gone increase, and not just obviously because of that, but they obviously have played a role in that. Like, how important, like, to that story do you think those companies are, and has that really fed into your kind of, when it's actually affecting your pocket a lot, how much has that affected your thought process on these?
It's really strange and it's difficult to unravel. And I sometimes wish that I had kind of economist brain necessary to fully tease out those connections, because it's easy for me to say, rents have skyrocketed and we've had a homelessness crisis in the same time frame in which Google has been in Ireland, and this so-called ecosystem has sprung up around Google of all these tech companies and others before it, like IBM and Microsoft, long before it. I think it's absolutely part of the modern identity of Dublin, and it plays into, and it's not like, I'm not saying correlation is causation, but there is definitely, there have been political regimes in Dublin over the last few years where I think they've just tried to put it out of mind. I think they've just put off indefinitely addressing it. And I see it because, like, I sometimes have to write about these, like, over the last year, I wrote about all these housing conferences, and I'd see Owen Murphy get up and give these talks. And he was talking in terms of the year 2030. Then he was talking about 2050. And I was like, what about now? It doesn't make any sense. And meanwhile, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael were pandering to companies like Google, offering them breaks, vast amounts of money over the years. So it's not about saying tech is the only thing that caused the housing crisis in Ireland, because that would be just completely ridiculous. It's about saying that Ireland's connection, its special relationship to tech, is a reflection of a broader set of priorities and things they're neglecting. And I don't know what age are you, but I mean, you're definitely of a generation affected by this, and so am I.
Yeah, I'm 23.
Right. So I mean, yeah, I'd be really intrigued to know actually, like how your generation feel about things like owning homes. I mean,
Mm.
to me, it's just laughable for me to think that I'll ever own one. Some people I know have houses, but it's rare. And I think, in the book, I wanted to dramatize not only the fact that the story of technology over the last 10 to 20 years is actually woven into the story of Dublin and Dublin's changes that it's gone through, and the fact that basically like all the data in at least half the planet is just funneled through Dublin. It's so fascinating, like that we're this tiny country. We think of ourselves as kind of guiltless in all this, we're not a world player. We're such an intrinsic part of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing, like just walking through the Docklands. And I wanted to, the Docklands have kind of starring role in one or two of the chapters in the book, like the mood of the night gym. I wanted it to be cyberpunk, and yeah, then it's also obviously overlapping with my adult life. And how does that change all of our behavior to each other? How does that change things like, say, relationships, when you know that someone might just leave the country at the drop of a hat?
Mm. Yeah, and you obviously spend a lot of time in Berlin now, I believe, and I'm living in Stockholm at the minute, and I'm not sure if this is like you're obviously from Dublin, are you?
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously both of us are from Dublin, and when I'm in Stockholm, I'm kind of like struck by the sense of the kind of value that they put on the city, and like actually,
Yeah.
there's a sense of things actually working here, and and things just go right. And I'm not sure, is it just because I'm from Dublin and I've spent too much time there that I can kind of critique every little bit of it. But do you get that sense when you're in Berlin as well, that there's just a city that kind of values itself more than we seem to?
Yeah, I no, I've never been to Stockholm. I was going to say when I was in Sweden, I've been to Denmark, and I got that exact sense from the minute the minute I was off the plane. Everything was beautifully designed and everything was functioning. Oh, you're so lucky you're in Stockholm. Wow.
Oh, it's some city.
Yeah, and stylish, just so stylish. Yeah, I definitely get that in Berlin. I just remember about like a week into arriving there, going to Tempelhof, and this used to be this Nazi airfield. And what did they decide to do? They just made it this lovely park, so that like, history is over, that's gone. Let's make this something that prioritizes the happiness and the health of the people in the city, and like I deliberately put in a scene on, I think it's May 1st, and that's the big kind of day for workers to take the day off, and they have this big party in the streets. It's just about priorities, isn't it? Can you imagine having that in Dublin? Like we, when we can, we have our cans by the canal, although now that's off the cards apparently, thanks to Dublin City Council. But in Berlin, they just care about outdoor space, they care about quality of life, and you can see it in people. Like they have a kind of healthiness and a happiness, and rents. I mean, the rent cap is now gone as of a month ago, I think. So well, let's see how it changes. My boyfriend and I are about to just go back now in a month's time. But overall, yeah, it's a completely different approach to life, and one where I think people are happier and healthier. I just think Dublin has this malaise going on, and I don't want to like universally shit on Dublin. Like it's a lovely, it's a beautiful city, and it has so much going for it, but we haven't addressed things that are now becoming problems, I think. And I think it's more than just, oh, artists, so we're always leaving Ireland, or writers are always leaving Ireland, and young people go away and they come back. I think it's more than that. I think it's a deeper malaise now, and one which is becoming increasingly urgent.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's so many issues that you can raise there. Actually, just on that you mentioned artists leaving, I just read an article like 5 minutes before we came on this call that the government might be bringing in like a basic income for people in the arts. What do you think of that?
That would be brilliant if they did that. I mean, otherwise it's just not feasible to live here. Yeah, I'd be very happy to see that, and then maybe expand it into other areas too.
Yeah. Yeah, you obviously have quite a like socialist leanings, I think would be fair to say.
Yeah, I didn't want the book to be polemical. And I wanted, but obviously there is a bit of a left-wing bent to it. I've also been quite critical of the left too at times, because they do sometimes disappoint me,
Hmm.
especially on Twitter. But yeah, to me, I mean, it's interesting how the accelerating effect of technology is bringing then to the fore some ideas which probably recently would have been thought quite extreme. Like, I've read that, it's weird. The issue of UBI is this, it's kind of a talking point with people like Zuckerberg, and that raises all sorts of weird issues, because then, yeah, if we got the Zuckerberg approved UBI, it would probably mean that Zuckerberg was now running the world. Something a bit more socialist in a sense then would be not only UBI, but also people receive some sort of value for their data if they choose to let them use it, or just more content around data in general, and more education would be a nice start. I do think in Europe we have slightly more progressive rules around these things, but we also have I'm kind of half following it. I'm probably a little bit behind with it. Do you know about like Max Schrems going and his battle with the data commissioner? So, even though we have things like GDPR, how far do they actually go? Maybe not that far.
Yeah. I think I heard you on a podcast mention about how long it would take you to actually read some of the
Oh yeah,
the consent details for different apps and potentially social media. It might have been Facebook you were talking about, and then also the kind of how much qualifications you would need to actually understand the jargon
yeah.
involved in that.
72 days, 75 days, something like that. More time than we have.
But like it's crazy that they're allowed to get away with that type of stuff. Like, clearly just, yeah, okay, you've put in the thing, but it's obviously not, it's fit for purpose at all.
Yeah, it's funny. I was writing a talk this week because I'm gonna do a festival next week called Creative Folkstone. I think it has some kind of connection to H.G. Wells, and they wanted me to write about the future. And the thing that I don't want to write about the future unless it's fiction. I love like science fiction novels set in the future, but I'm not really comfortable making pronouncements about now, about where it's going to go next. But I decided to write about just that actual issue in itself, and about digital profits. And I don't know, because you're probably too young to have ever seen him, but there was this guy about like 5 to 10 years ago called David Shing, or Shingy, and his job title was literally digital profit. And he would get up on stage and just lather nonsense, like actual gibberish about futuristic tech trends. And he looked like a manga character that was a pickup artist. Like, he looked insane, and his whole job was just insane. But the more I think about it now, like, that time is over. I think the sort of pomp, the kind of hype and the hysteria around tech is over now, because we are so distrusting. Like, we may not have read the full 72 days worth of T&Cs, but we know they're up to no good. And some of us saw like whatever documentaries on Netflix, and we have been paying a little attention. We should have been paying attention back when Snowden first went public, but it's taken a long time, But I think, it's funny, even if you juxtapose like tech culture 10 years ago with these mad like hoodie guys on stages, always gesticulating wildly. And, if you compare that to now, I'm not sure they could get away with that. I think they have to kind of keep their heads down, continue to steal the data. But the public mood has changed a little bit, and no one's ever going to buy that bullshit again, I think.
So what do you think of like startup culture then? I think that's kind of what you're getting at with like tech culture. I think you mentioned like, that whole kind of fail, like fail until you can't fail again and stuff like that. And this kind of, I kind of struck with startup culture. Like, I work a good bit with startups, so I probably shouldn't be saying this, but they, it kind of is a middle class pursuit for the most part. Like, you know what I mean? It's not as if it's like rags to riches for most people that make it. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's like the cool thing to do in a way.
Yeah, in terms of class, I I wonder if there's a way to prove that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's true.
Mm.
The sheer amount of money and how flippantly it's burned through is sort of shocking and scary to me, and just weird, frankly, because as a nation, we have this history of falling for things. I think it's a kind of post-colonial condition. Like, we get money, we blow it, we all buy holiday homes. We, everything collapses. We're poor. We make money again. We give it all to tech companies. And I just think maybe, it's a kind of tech-centric point of view because I was working for startups at that time, but it definitely felt like a bubble. It never had its dramatic pop, which is good. But I do think it's a bit more low key now than it was maybe even like 5 years ago. I don't know about startup culture. When I was around it, it definitely did have too much money in it and a lot of excess and a lot of nonsense. But I know that we've also produced some genuinely very useful technologies, and that also within that community, there is a lot of skepticism of the bullshit, from the people who are onto something actually good. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was probably a bit, yeah, I was wrong, but I get what you mean. Like it was interesting. I think the last 10 years have been particularly like venture capital. There's so much money, and I don't know if you remember that company Quibi, like last year that went bust, that were like funded $1 billion. I can't remember the name of the woman that was running it. But it was short for quick bites, and then it was like just short little bites that people would watch in their commute, and it launched like the start of March, and then obviously there was no commutes, so it went completely bust.
Wow.
But anyway, I just found that interesting, where there's so much money put into a company, and it was
Also,
never sounded a great
TikTok
idea.
probably took their glory.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's funny how people keep, like, before that, there was that other, God, what was the name of it? The other short video platform.
Oh, Vine.
Vine.
That was good.
Yeah. But it's funny, it took a few attempts to make it stick, but I feel like it has stuck now with TikTok, and they've expanded so much in lockdown that, like, they can't actually house all their workers.
Do you use TikTok at all, or?
No, I've never been on it. I should probably. I know that a lot of the drag queens I follow are on it. But no, I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter, and I try to avoid them both.
Yeah, Facebook's pretty lame these days, so I wouldn't
Oh
be going
yeah.
there new there.
Can't even imagine. Every time I go back in, I can't use it and I can't remember how to deactivate it. And I have to look up like step-by-step guides because they've changed it again.
Yeah, the format's completely different now to what I remember it being. I mean, there's like so many random tabs, and yeah, like I remember when it was actually proper cool. I think you mentioned actually in the book, Connie 2012, and my memory
Yes.
of that is hilarious. I think like 14 or something, and I came back from school. I didn't have an iPhone. I only had like an iPod Touch. I don't know if you like, they're basically like an iPhone, but you didn't
Yeah.
have like the phone feature. And I remember coming back from school and then going onto Facebook, and everyone was sharing this video, and it was like 30 minutes. I was like, what is this? Like it was literally everywhere.
I find this amazing anti-TED talk from, oh God, I wish I could remember his name. He has like an alliterative name, but basically, is it called the TED Foundation, allowed this guy on, who I think he's a sociologist, and he just ripped into TED and everything that TED stands for, but he named Connie 2012 as the peak of, I guess, what you could call kind of TED techno solutionism. But that, like, his thesis was that in every TED talk, they want to talk about the future, but they also want everything to stay the same. And they want to just kind of massage the ego of the viewer for watching a TED talk, because aren't you great educating yourself, and also attain all the glory for themselves, and also claim the right to predict the future. And it always involves a lot of like gesticulating as well, as is always the case with tech hype. But yeah, Coney 2012 to me was like, it was the kind of peak of techno solutionism. Like, I'm inclined to agree with the anti-tech TED talk, or the anti-TED TED talk. This idea that just by participating, by this digital citizenship, you could somehow wade into African geopolitics and find this man. Um, we'll find him together. No one's found him yet. That's still up for grabs. Is anyone going to actually step up to it and like go out there with big guns and bring down Joseph Coney?
I wonder if that video must still be on YouTube. I must go watch it. But remember the guy who made the video, he was arrested like, was it like a week,
He'd taken
2
off
weeks
all
later?
his clothes and he was having a psychotic break.
Yeah, in a park in
Yeah.
California.
I'd say there was a moment of clarity or a kind of like catharsis, and he realized what he had done and the vastness of what he had done and how completely ridiculous it was.
Yeah.
And then he just detached, like departed from reality. I don't blame him for ending up that way.
I think that was like an education for 14-year-old me in how the internet is not real, in terms of like,
Yeah.
I believed this guy so much for that video. And then like 2 weeks later, I was reading about his, demise and how he had done all this stuff. And it was, I don't know. I think it was a good thing to have happened for a lot of people to realize that these things are just fads. Although that these things still go off on their own now anyway,
Maybe he'll be the one. He'll be like kind of scrawny Rambo who goes into the jungle. Is Joseph Coney in a jungle? I don't know, but maybe because he's the one who created this in the first place, he should be the one to actually go and in hand-to-hand combat defeat Joseph Coney.
Sounds like a Tropic Thunder type movie coming. I feel.
Yeah. Will someone like buy this pitch if I send this around Hollywood? This is my film I'm gonna make about like the social media tech bro who now is going to fight Joseph Coney. Was it like a kind of, a really tragic, pathetic John Wick? Something like that, it'd be good. I think also that sort of reeks of a more extreme form of something that I see a lot today, which is like people become so convinced that they have to have the last word, or they must make this statement on Twitter. It's a matter of life and death, and their entire being is going to be channeled into this one post. And it's always this ill-advised comment on something. I notice people just have to make their comment, and then the comment is awful and you regret it the next day and you get loads of shit for it and you worry that everyone is judging you who used to be your friends. That to me seems a really common sequence of events with social media. And I get the sense with the Coney guy that he really believed he was onto something like very good and very noble, and he never kind of finished that thought of like, how is this going to work? What will happen when this video gets out? I don't know what that word is. That there needs to be a word for it, but that urgent feeling that people get where they have to like go to war over some stupid point, like being made by a celebrity on Twitter. I hate it so much. At its most extreme form, you see like really crazy shit like Graham Linehan, that like the last 5 years of Graham Linehan's life. I mean, how did that get into his head that this would become his crusade? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and like I saw Piers Morgan today as well. He was like tweeting about, I don't know if you saw Naomi Osaka. She's like the
oh yeah, I read about this. Yeah.
I actually don't know enough about the story, but I know it's like, let the girl do what she wants. Like if she doesn't want to play, she doesn't want to play. And he just like is giving his a massive opinion on how petulant she is. And I always find it so strange. I wonder why he decides to do that every time.
Well, he's paid to do it.
Do you think?
And he knows, like, he's had the cycle negatively, the cycle is enforced now. It's like, trigger the libs. Listeners, I'm doing little inverted commas with my fingers. But like, it set them off. And then the more angry people get, the more you can say you're right. And the more persecuted you can be to everyone who supports you. And it's an economy of agitation, annoyance, and cruelty at the heart of it all, because what the fuck does he care about Naomi Osaka and why she doesn't want to talk to the press? He is the press. It's ironic, like, that he thinks that he's right and he is the press. And I think we're all implicated in it on some level now, where, things happen and you get that pang and you feel like you'll miss your chance if you don't put in your words now, your hot take. Writing The Disconnect was very much a kind of, and I wasn't even fully sold on it myself when I started, but what I really did think was there has to be a slower form of thinking. I was still very much online, and I was thinking, but what if I started to think more slowly? What if I didn't rush to form judgments? What if, I didn't share those judgments within minutes of the thing happening? And now I live in a sort of strange limbo where I'm trying to still think slowly, and I'm trying to, write substantially and form the opinions in a kind of gradual, careful way. But I can't deny that there is a feeling of belonging you get from just jumping on a cause on Twitter, on Irish Twitter, it's such an active thing, and there's a new one every day, right?
Every day. But what I was just going to say there actually is it kind of like annoys me, like as a person that I know about the Piers Morgan, Naomi Osaka thing. Like I often just think like, why did I just not like leave that and not care? Or, I'm trying to think of another one, but I think I heard someone say today that only like 40% of people know what the word woke is. I was like, would I just be better off like not knowing what that is and being part of the 60% that just don't get involved in these kind of cultural things that never really amount to much anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it's a regret in everyone's life that they'd love to just kind of peel away a layer of self-awareness. Because the woke thing, I mean, we've definitely moved on now. And my brother lives in England, and he kind of is always telling me that like the word woke is being used as the scaremongering thing by the right in England. And that, you get these kind of tragic things like the actor Lawrence Fox like complaining about wokeism in Britain and all this stuff. But I don't know what the aftermath of it is now, like whether even soon, I suspect soon the word woke will just be gone. Maybe not, I don't know. But one thing that I hate about it is that level of awareness where suddenly I'm not acting from instinct anymore. So I can't say, or like if I respond to something and I just say that's so wrong, that's messed up, then someone can then come in and tell me, no, you're just being woke, you don't actually feel that way, you're posturing. And then I create this strange dialogue within my own head where I'm like, am I just posturing? Do I want a better world for people? Do I care about other people? Yeah, I do care about other people, but if it takes place on the internet, then it's always for public consumption, right? It's always for an audience. It's always to feed into the brand called me. So yeah, of course, something like wokeness and the kind of debates that come out of even the phenomenon of wokeness, of course, it's native to the internet because everything there is for show. Let's just hope that we're all nice people off the internet,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing though. Most people generally are off the internet, are really decent people.
We tend to be sound. Yes. Yeah. I mean, most of them, hopefully.
Most of them,
maybe
yeah.
Not Piers Morgan. Maybe he's just miserable.
Yeah, you would love to actually know what, like when he's sitting at home, what what he actually is like. But again, I don't even know why I care, but I do, and that's the annoying thing for me. So, but no, Roisin, I don't want to take you too much longer. So I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I really enjoyed the book. And look forward to whatever what you said you were writing a book. What's the next one?
Oh, it's not really fully formed yet, but I've got a few things lined up in the next while. I've got an essay about the deep sea and squids and psychedelic octopuses coming out soon, and another talk on digital profits next week. Basically, I'm just writing about weird stuff, as I always have done.
Sounds fun though. Are you good for like setting aside time every day, or how's your kind of writing process?
No, I just write in mad binges. I don't drink Monster Energy anymore, which is in the book, but I do these kind of rushes of work, and then I just have so much other work that gets in the way. It's kind of heartbreaking, frankly. I'm thinking once I get back to Berlin in July that I'm going to try and clear some time and get more of the stuff I actually want to do.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely be reading. Honestly, it was really great to talk to you, but also to read your book. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Hopefully get to meet you if you ever want to come to Stockholm.
Oh my God, enjoy Stockholm.
I will.
Amazing. Great place to be.
Definitely. Yeah, no, enjoy Berlin whenever you get back there. And thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure.
Cool.
Cheers.